dogs and cats and 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 dogs and cats and
monkey, it's a monkey, and another monkey, it's a really monkey, and a budgie, and a monkey, and a budgie. Rabbit, elephant, turkey, bison, leopard, lion, axolotl, lizard, donkey, hippo, turtle, beaver, rhino, one that's albino. Monkey, and a budgie, monkey, and a budgie.
Well, that was, just for those of you who didn't know, that was Tropfest winner in 2011.
Yeah.
And that kind of kicked it off for you in many ways, didn't it?
Yeah, probably more ways than many people realise, because it certainly did creatively, I guess, but I had quite a life lesson by making that film, and up until then I'd worked really hard on cultivating this kind of actor's image of a rolly, smoking, red wine drinking, velvet jacket wearing kind of Lothario, and then my now wife, we were about 2 years into our relationship, and she wanted to do this detox thing. You drink this kind of bentonite clay stuff and your poo looks really weird. And I said, well, if we're going to do that for 3 days, we've got to do something to fill the time. And I'd written that song for some friend's kids and just as a fun thing. And I said, well, let's make a stop motion animation out of it, just print out little characters and cut it out. And it cost $80. And someone said, or she said, oh, let's put it into Tropfest. And I was like, no, that completely goes against my cool image that I've been cultivating. And she said, go on, just chuck it in. And then, obviously it made the finals, and I was kind of like, oh shit, now I've got to go and watch it with heaps of people. And then it won. And so it was kind of this smack in the backside that I needed. And the reasons I'd taken so long to make anything is I was quite, I guess, scared to put my own voice out into the world. That's why I hid behind this acting shop front. And I'd feared backlash, or I'd feared actually exposing that part of me. And so, as fate would have it, that often Tropfest winners get absolutely smashed the next day in the press, and that happened to me. So, I got accused of plagiarism, and people writing to me saying, you should die and stuff like that. It was really weird. It's like Tropfest, And
how dare you make us laugh, you bastard.
They were right too, yeah. And so it was actually the best thing that ever happened, because all those things that I'd feared, I had to confront. And I was like, wow, that did hurt, yeah, and it wasn't nice, but it was all right. It wasn't as big and scary, and didn't have as much significance that I'd given it. And that was a real catalyst to just get on with it and make things and stop being scared of putting yourself out there.
So you feel a little bit uncomfortable over there when we were playing it?
Yeah, it's just, I haven't watched it for a long time.
You've moved on a bit from there. You've raised the bar a little bit.
Yeah, the intention was, that was my first experiment of going, right, how can you use a creative device to get a message across, which has kind of been quite inspiring. But what was great about that, actually, which a lot of people wouldn't know, is in the year after that film was made, I would often get sent videos from around the world, and of people doing versions of that, or kids doing it at a Stedfords and things like that, which is really great. But there was there was a 600-piece marching band in Carolina, a school, and they did an entire lap of an oval marching, 600 kids playing drum, reciting that, So, idiots. But no, it's it's great to this little thing you can do with your wife, when you're pooing weird clay, that can suddenly reach a wider audience.
Well, I was thinking, we need a new anthem, right? Do you reckon,
Sure, take it, man. Take it, it's fine.
Because a lot of people may or may not know that you've had quite a successful and extensive acting career. You were in Ballabo, you were in The Tracker, you were in Thunderstruck. Did you appear on Neighbours or Home and Away to really cap your career?
No, not that successful. But I did. But I always had I was lucky enough to have had an experience like The Tracker, which was with David Goldberg. That was my first film, and I kind of got spoiled in a way, because I hope they'd all be like that. And someone like Rolf de Heer just makes films with such integrity and class, and sadly, there are lots of things out there that don't fit that bill. And Balibo was another one where you get to recreate someone's life and tell this true story, which was a really powerful experience. But I always felt frustrated, as many actors do, that it's an inherently very narcissistic industry, and you get well fed and people give you praise and stuff, which can be very ego stroking. But there's an emptiness that often comes with that industry, and I always had a yearning to do something differently and tell my own stories, but never had the courage to do so. I was always quite scared of that, so that's why that was quite a defining moment for me. Yeah.
And like most actors, they tend to seek out Hollywood. Did you do that too?
Oh yeah, I gave it a red hot go. So I went there, I was 24, and I went there and I actually did How I Met Your Mother. I had a couple of episodes with Enrique Iglesias, Julio's son, quite a claim to fame. And it was actually good because I saw what it was, and I think I'd built it up in my head. I'm from Adelaide, and it's a pretty small town, and you have these dreams, and suddenly you're in America and you're sort of doing this big show, and it was just so cold. Like it was, the actors were nice, but then there's a bank of monitors, 10 monitors, and there's 4 producers behind it looking at the screen. The director, you have no rapport with, they just report back what the producers are saying, and they're like, just smile more on that line. And so the bubble got burst, in a sense, for me. I guess I'd put it on a pedestal, and the reality was that it's a machine over there, and that, I guess, really drove a desire again to sort of tell my own stories and get out there and put my voice out there.
And you mentioned there was kind of a nadir point in LA, I think, when you were working in a bit of a cafe. Tell us a bit more about that.
There's been a few nadir points in my life, but that was one. I guess I was 31 and working in a sushi restaurant in LA, as many actors do, and I just sort of struggled with that. And then I went to London with following a girl that I'd fallen in love with, and just remember we had a pretty bad breakup, and then she invited me to this nightclub she was working at and decided to pash another guy in front of me, which, each their own. But I remember, I actually should thank her in retrospect, but I remember sitting on the stairs of London at 3 a.m, no friends at all, like kind of pretty much heartbroken, crying my eyes out and going, what is this fucking life? Like, what's this about? How did I get here? And there's got to be more to it than this. I'm clearly not understanding the mechanisms of what life is supposed to be. And I guess that sort of sent me on a mission of trying to understand what this is all about and who we are and what makes us tick and what is this universe we reside in. And so I went on this kind of clandestine mission of reading all these books in secret and hiding them under my bed because I was too, again, scared to share that side of me. And just had some wonderful moments along that journey. And then meeting Zoe was probably the biggest one. I met her when we was doing Balibo in East Timor, and straight away had that moment where I knew she was going to be someone I'd be with forever, but I was like, I'm just not ready. I'm so not ready for this person. And she's just a very special human being in terms of she's a radiant beast, and I just knew that I had to get rid of some baggage and stop smoking Marlboro Lights and kind of let go of this bullshit. And, I think I was 33 and my longest relationship was 3 months by then. And now I'm, we're nearly 9 years in, So that took a lot of self-analysis and examination and some cold, hard truths that once faced has opened up untold chapters across a range of fields in my life. So I'm really glad that I've done that work and feel much better for it.
And it seems that you went from doing that $80 Tropfest film to then somehow producing the most successful Australian documentary of all time, that Sugar film. How on earth did that happen?
So when I finished doing Tropfest, that film, I went and did a film in India. It was about a cricket film, and it was produced by Madman. And they said to me at the time, look, do you want to make a film? Is that something you're interested in? And I sort of thought, well, yeah, I'd like to one day. And I didn't really know what it was going to be about. And I just noticed at the time there was a lot of press emerging about sugar. It was just starting to bubble under the surface. But the camps were really divided. People were really kind of, it's great, no, it's poison. There was no middle ground. And I guess something about that topic struck me in terms of cinematically, the tools you get to play with would be this kind of Willy Wonka madness of colour and using the tricks of the food industry to subvert the message to a health one for kids was something really exciting to me. And I thought this could really work as a film, and we could make it really fun and playful. And they sort of went for that idea. And it all started very low key. We did this experiment first and didn't know whether we were going to have a film, because I didn't know much about nutrition at the time, and thought, well, there's a chance nothing will happen to me. I'm eating this sugar, but I might put on a kilo, and I mean, that's a pretty boring film. And so my wife did a lot of the filming early, my mum, and we had no budget. And then, after 3 weeks, I got I got fatty liver disease. And even the doctors were like, holy shit, you know, and the producer was like, yes, that's fantastic. Thanks, mate, that's great. And so I guess that's when the seriousness of what we were dealing with kind of hit home, and that's when we reached out to Hugh Jackman and Stephen Fry and all these other people, and I think there was not really any human trials of people doing sugar. There was lots in rats at the time, but no human had been dumb enough to eat that amount of sugar
And then
without them knowing they were doing it. And now there's just countless human studies that are showing the same things that I got. So, it was just one of those lovely serendipitous zeitgeisty moments. I think that there was already an awareness about sugar out there. I mean, some people have known this stuff since the 70s, you know. But we just happened to strike at the right time, and I guess had an accessible film, which was always the intention. I used to say to people that there's awareness in this issue of eastern suburbs, Bondi, people get it, that we had to somehow penetrate the quinoa curtain, like get out. You know, like it can be a kale curtain too, but and actually get it out to people that need to see it, and that's, as you saw today, that's the best thing. You get a completely tattooed guy from the Gold Coast, and, mate, I fucking loved your film, like, you know, and I've never watched a doco before, and I watched yours, you know, and that kind of warms the heart, and that was the point. I think we capitalised, and we did manage to get people to see it, which is great.
And for those who haven't seen it, we've got a little film clip here. If we could just do your clicker. Here we go.
Sugar is now found in 80% of the foods we eat, but with the constant confusion over its effects on our health, and with this little person on the way, I feel like I need some definitive answers.
The point is to test out a very high sugar diet.
How are you going to do that?
If you want to match averages, 40 teaspoons of sugar a day.
40 a day.
But they must be hidden sugars found in commonly perceived healthy foods and drinks. So no soft drink, confectionery or ice cream.
People on this planet are growing sicker every day. And many scientists now believe that fructose has a role to play.
I'm eating the same amount of calories as I did before, and I'm not feeling full.
These calories do dramatically different things in the human body.
If I kept going to these levels, would I be knocking on the door of obesity?
Definitely. Definitely got far to go.
Any sugar, brown sugar, white sugar, fruit juice concentrate from fruit juice, equal effect on your health.
Not feeling very well at all today. My fuse is a lot shorter.
Your mental function is just unstable.
You've got the signs of a fatty liver. This is the first time I've seen that it can be developed in 2 or 3 weeks.
Whenever you walk into a supermarket, make an immediate turn for the produce aisle and avoid everything in the middle.
Sugar's not evil, but life is so much better when you get rid of it.
And I know in the acting game, it's very easy for an actor to be typecast in a particular sort of role or genre. And so I know that when people think of you nowadays, and then when you look online, like it's all about that sugar, or you're asked to speak on health matters. But I know there's so much more to you than that. That's what we really want to tap into tonight. But one thing I wanted to ask you, what effect have you noticed from that film? Because I know you've got a foundation that you're working with the Indigenous Australians in up north, I think. And I think it's rolled out in a sort of a corporate environment in schools. So what are some of the things that have come from that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been crazy. We were lucky enough to team up with an organisation called Good Pitch, and they put you, they choose 6 films and they team you up with the philanthropic community. So you basically get money to form an outreach program. So you've got the film, but then they team you up with like Bupa and YMCA and different organisations to get the message out there. So we were lucky enough to develop like a full curriculum for Australian schools. It's mapped to the Australian schools from grade 5 to 11, and that's in over 1,000 schools now in Australia. There's an Aboriginal foundation that appears in the film that we've been able to establish for 2.5 years now, and go out into the lands, reorder foods, do clearer labelling, educate the people on what they're eating, because they're having 5 cans of Coke a day. There's a corporate wellness program now that's some really large. I mean, I got a bit of a shock the other day. I was flown to talk at Google, and they've all gone sugar-free at Google, and the chef just uses our recipe books. And then we've had policy, like I did a parliamentary screening in the UK with Jamie Oliver and watched it with all the pollies, and they've implemented a sugar tax. New Zealand, we did a screening there for Parliament. They banned sugary drinks in all their hospitals. It's, it's one of those things where you... And that's, I guess, what I've taken away from it is that's the power of what a film can do. And once you... Hollywood have known it for years, but they use it to subvert our values. But when you can use a film and educate the public, that's all it is. And once people are armed with that knowledge, then they can take true action. And I guess that's inspiring the next film and stuff. I just think people aren't truly ecologically and economically literate about what's going on right now. And if we can get people to really understand the truth, then there's no other choice but to take action. So I've learnt so much. It's changed my life in the last 2 years in terms of the people I've met and the things I've learnt. And it's incredibly inspiring,
And I noticed you have a really unique twist or take on the films that you create. And it reminds me of something I saw you quote once from Mark Twain, that quote. Do you remember what it was?
Oh, there's an Oscar Wilde quote.
Oscar Wilde.
I had it in my office. It was, if you want to tell people the truth, you got to make them laugh, or they'll kill you. And that's really applicable when you're dealing with the food industry and then the trying to expose the economic system. So, I just think there is a typecast version or perception of what a documentary is, which is fantastic, and I love them, but it can be quite a small audience in a sense that you can do it, tour the festivals and whatnot, and that's great. And there's a documentary crowd that quite enjoys the documentaries, and it might screen at SBS at 11:30 on a Sunday night. and the goal was always, we've just got to smash that. Like that. That's they get it. They're within the quinoa curtain. They understand that. But how do we actually make it fun? And I think, people learn and listen better when they're laughing and enjoying themselves. So there's no reason that you can't take a serious topic and make it really light and playful.
And traditionally, documentaries are a surefire way to lose money, aren't they?
Oh, correct.
Like 1 in 10 Hollywood films is successful and 9 are kind of a throwaway, but the one that is successful pays for the 9 that failed. Whereas a documentary, I think, very few of them would make a profit, right? Except yours, because it was so successful. Yeah, but that's the funny thing, is that people often, they're very kind to me online, and they say, I hope you're happy now, mate. You've created a fucking sugar empire. You must be rolling in money, and, it's the most successful. It's like, oh, man, if you understood how this system works. And sadly, in Australia, so say you make $3 million at the box office. The system currently is that the cinemas take 70%. So Nova, whatever it is, they just take 70. Thank you. And then that remaining 30% goes to all the investors, but then there's distribution, then there's the money spent on advertising and PA. So there's people desperately trying to change the system at the moment, because 99% of first-time directors don't make another film in this country because there's no incentive to. And as we know, we are struggling at the box office with our films. The audiences that don't go and see our films, we can't compete with their marketing budgets and whatnot. So we thought long and hard when we released the film and really wanted to do it differently, and so came up with this idea that we'd almost make them into events, like a town meeting. So we planned 28 screenings around Australia. We had 3 or 4 experts on the panel. We invited families to come along, and they all sold out within about 10 days. So we ended up doing 72 around the country. It was like this travelling sugar circus. And it was just so brilliant, because it gave people... I mean, cinema works when we all watch it together. These days we often watch it on our own on a laptop. But what cinema can be when it's really powerful is this group connection. And to have, mothers standing up in tears going like, why are they doing this to our kids? And why don't we...
it was just that kind of democracy alive and thriving off the back of a film, and it was very, very, very powerful for me to witness that and be a part of it, and has absolutely inspired me in terms of the next thing I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I notice all great men and women, they start very humbly in their kitchen home, teetering around, like my brother who created Subi. He was making jeans on the kitchen floor with sandpaper, and it became one of the best labels in Australia's history. And he was dyeing T-shirts. They didn't know how to do it, so they were doing it in the toilet, and they'd sort of pour the dye in and flush and get that colour, and then they'd do the next one. And
Sure.
So it seems that there is this natural graduation. So you've kind of gone from, Animal Kingdom, and now you've gone to that sugar. And what are you doing next? Like, this is the thing that I really wanted to spend most of the night exploring, because it sort of speaks of what inspires you as a human being and how you view, planetary consciousness in our society.
Well, I think we can all attest to the narrative that we're given at the moment about our future is inherently dystopic. Like any news feed is filled with those images, and these are the images that we're showing our kids, and we know also from studies now that they're paralysing. So if you see countless melting ice caps and skinny polar bears, we actually shut down. It's like, fuck, I can't deal with that, because in a sense we're being asked to face our own death, the extinction of us as a species, and that's been done to death. And so I guess what we're trying to do with this new film is actually shape a new narrative and use all that energy that we're putting into that negative space to actually robustly discuss the solutions and what we can do about it. So the film is kind of pretty high concept in that it's a documentary set in 2040.
It's its own unique genre, right?
It's, eco sci-fi, and it's set in 2040, and it looks back to now and kind of maps out this blueprint for change of how we got to a more sustainable and equitable planet. So, I mean, the tagline could be, what would the future look like if we simply embraced the best of today? So we've kind of been scouring the globe for these flickers of hope, and I can tell you that the main problem has been that there's so much, and how we're going to put it in a film. It is unbelievable how many wonderful things are out there, but they're lurking in the fringes because it doesn't suit the mainstream narrative. It suits that agenda if we're in fear and hopeless and divided and competitive with each other. And the other beautiful thing has been the amount of support that we've had, that people are just so ready for this new narrative. So we've had, groups from Tesla to NASA to American military, Australian military, all giving us modelling and planning about what might happen with the climate the next 20 years and how we'd respond to it, issues of national security and how that's got to impact us, food and agriculture, all these different fields, that it's been kind of completely overwhelming, the support we've had. And what we're trying to do is not just make this film. The film is kind of the seed, the tiny element of it, but through Good Pitch, again, we've got enough money to build an entire outreach program that, we're working with people from Google that have just left to build almost like a new democratic platform for us to debate, discuss these ideas in the film and collectively have a vision board for 2040 and where we're headed. Because we don't do it. We do it as individuals. We're told to have goals, have a plan, but we don't do it as a planet. And
Like
why should we?
said.
That's it. We need to have a blueprint. And even if it's horribly wrong and you disagree with it, let's at least put something up on that board and then passionately discuss it and go, So the challenge is, it's not a utopia in that sense. It's trying to be plausible, which I think will make it more believable if it's a kind of based in reality. But it's a letter to my daughter on her 21st birthday in 2040.
We've got a little... how would we describe what we're about to watch? This is it. It's...
So this is it's a concept. So we, at Good Pitch, I had to pitch the film for 7 minutes and then put it together like a 2-minute piece. So that was about 8 months ago. So the film is entirely different, but it just had to give people a sense of what we're doing.
And what is Good Pitch for those that don't know?
It's just so it's an organisation where you stand in a room with 500 philanthropists at the Opera House, and you get to pitch your film for 7 minutes and show a clip, and then it's like this kind of think Oprah Winfrey on steroids. People stand up and go, "I love your film. I'm going to give you $50,000," and someone else says, "I'm going to give you $100,000," and we raised over $2 million in 7 minutes. Which was crazy.
Beautiful.
So I've got a lovely new Ferrari now. We've just moved to...
that you drive to your sugar mansion.
Everyone in 2040 is driving Ferrari, so I just thought...
All right, so this isn't the film, but to pitch there, you had to create something.
Yes,
so
it's not a trailer. It's just like a teaser concept, weird thing.
Yeah, so here we go.
Well, today is the 16th of June, 2040. And 21 years ago today, a certain little poppet came into the world. Your mum and I were pretty concerned about the state of the world back then and what you might have to deal with as you got older, especially in regard to the way we were treating each other and the planet. But by the time you were 5, something was brewing, shifting towards the positive. It was in the early 2020s that we really began to heed the advice that so many had been offering for decades.
The solar energy striking the Earth in 1 hour is sufficient to power the world economy for 1 year.
As clean, cheap, decentralised energy systems took off around the world, they brought with them new jobs and a new hope. Some were clearly more excited than others.
We are off the grid!
In 2015, we were told that if we fueled our cars with renewable energy, we would cut vehicle emissions by 84%. And by 2030, we'd actually done it. But there were other surprises too. By the time you were 12, we were watching a wellness report on the nightly news that replaced the financial one. By 14, you were helping your mother and I with mind-boggling technological advances. And at 19, you were actually learning to ride a hoverboard. You'll never truly understand just how happy that made me. There have been so many fantastic innovations in your short lifetime. It's hard for you to imagine now not planting your takeaway cup. But 20 years ago, we were sending 1 billion non-recyclable ones to landfill every year in this country alone. And again, in 2015, it was estimated that 80% of residents in our major cities could be fed through rooftop gardens. And now, we wouldn't have it any other way. There's no doubt we're still facing many challenges, especially with all these new technologies that continue to encroach on our lives. And yes, I am well aware that I'm starting to sound like Grandpa. But thankfully, by teaching all of our children about balance and compassion, we've seen a greater acceptance of others, no matter their race, creed, or colour. And along with this came a firm commitment to protect all species and to encourage biodiversity on this planet that we share as our home. We are so proud of the person you've become through this remarkable period of human history. Happy birthday, darling.
Touching. Yeah.
Yeah, it pisses me off that decisions being made at the moment around the world, especially in America, are going to affect my child. You know, and it's. Yeah. I don't think people fully comprehend that, and so some of these roundtables we've done for the film is the thing that comes up often is that there's a failure of imagination. People aren't getting the severity of the situation properly, the message isn't cutting through, and also people aren't dreaming about the possibilities, and I think that's where film can play an incredibly powerful role. So
why do you think the message isn't getting through?
Well, I think fundamentally we have a broken system. Like it's a broken system, and we kind of have to explore that in the film, that if you go back historically, that decisions have been made to diminish democracy right through history. We weren't trusted as a species. We were often called a bewildered herd that needed to be ruled by a specialised class of men, you know. Or you look in the 20s even when people like Edward Bernays and Walt Lippmann came in and said things like, we must distract the masses with superficialities. You know, we must develop this consumer culture so that the important people can make the decisions, you know. So we've had democracy wrestled from us for a long time. And we see it at elections. We see the fraudulent hope that's bandied around at elections that, you know, 0.02% of people actually get to nominate those candidates. So it looks like democracy, for example, in America. But a certain specialised class of people selected Hillary and Trump. You know, we didn't get to decide that. we're told these are the candidates, and they parade all this rubbish about hope and making things great again. And it's a con, you know, and I think we've been misled with hope. There are different types of hope, and that's a fraudulent hope, and that's an acquiescence to a lie. Whereas there's a real hope, which we're trying to find, which really celebrates heroes and rewards, you know, wild possibilities, but it lurks in the shadows.
So how would you define democracy?
Well, if you look historically, there's always been this wrestling about what it really means, and even Aristotle had issues with it because he said, you know, what it does and its danger is that it gives power to so many people that the poorer are going to overturn the rich. So we need to somehow work a way to protect that. And his solution was to say, well, we need equitable distribution of wealth. So if everyone has a plot of land, it's almost like welfare in a sense. You have democracy, but if you don't have that equal distribution of wealth, it's going to be chaos. And then, you know, the founding fathers in America kind of saw it a different way. They said, no, we need to crush democracy. We need to kind of stamp out solidarity. We need an opulent minority to rule the majority. That was his phrase, you know. So I don't think people are aware of that, you know, and we get to a situation now where we don't have either. We've got no equality of wealth. It's 1%, you know, it's 6 men own as much as half the rest of the world. And we don't have democracy either. So that's why we need a system change. And one of the most exciting things in this film of looking at all the different solutions is the participatory democracy solution that's happening around the world at the moment. And there's a group called the 5 Star Movement in Italy, and it is unbelievable what they're doing. And it's they are kind of reshaping politics in Italy, and they're winning seats, and they've now got the mayor of Rome. And it's the system is that it's almost like they use an online platform, and they pick someone randomly to represent them, in a sense. They're not allowed to have a career in politics. They're not allowed to take money out of politics. They have to acquiesce their own opinion or view or ego and just say what the collective people have voted for. And their basic tenets are like environment, sustainability, public water, no corruption in politics. And they are gaining massive momentum, you know. And so we're seeing these technologies like blockchain that are being invented now that are making secure votes that I think our political system is going to look fundamentally different by 2040, and that's very exciting, you know. And the mainstream are shit scared of it. That's why even in Italy, they're just, you know, there was a rally of 1 million Italians for 5 Star, and no one reported it in the press, not even in Italy, because it's so confronting to that agenda, which is, you know, the media are the corporate, the lapdogs in a sense. And that's not to say that there's bad people within there, and we found that making sugar. There's beautiful people that work at Coke. But the system says, we've got to hit our targets every week. We don't give a shit what's happening to Aboriginal people because we've actually got to get that target. Now, that's not people's fault. I think people are wonderful. But the system is shit. And the system makes us be competitive and envious, and it's divisive. And I think we need to overhaul it.
Do you think the average person actually believes the system is broken, or do you think that they're too preoccupied to even reflect on whether it is?
Well, no. I mean, I think the evidence is in the rise of Trump and Hanson and Le Pen in France. That we have to understand that people are, you know, Noam Chomsky calls it a generalised anger. People are angry, and because the system's let them down, they've been ripped off. And I think if you look at, in one aspect, the financialisation of the economy, which says we can make money out of thin air, which is kind of quite a new thing, but also these trade treaties that were signed without the public knowing in the 90s that meant, you know, all the jobs get taken out of America and just shipped to a different country, has just stripped people. And there were people in the 90s and early 2000s saying what this will lead to is the rise of demagogues and populists, because people will be so angry. Anyone that poses a solution, they'll go to them. So I think you'd be hard-pressed to find many people that think the system's functioning well. When you think of what we're doing to our planet, what we're doing to our health, it's pretty obvious that the signs are there. I just think people aren't armed with solutions yet, or what do I do? Where do I go? It's easy to just kind of bury your head in Twitter and just forget about it all.
And how do you see Australia sitting in the sort of global dynamics? Because we seem so far and away and so small and tiny and insignificant that it seems like the world's problems are so far away from us. Like mass poverty and homelessness and refugees, and you know, we don't have the economic disparity that a lot of other countries have. So what have you noticed about Australia in having travelled the world?
Oh, we're driven by the same fearful narratives, you know. I mean, you think of papers like the Daily Telegraph, it's just like, it's absolutely fueling that discontent and fear. And we should be leading the world in so many ways, and we're not. We've got brilliant minds here, amazing resources. I mean, renewables, for God's sake, like, you can't get more sun. Why aren't we leading the world? It's ridiculous. Well, we know why. Because our government, current government is, heavily subsidising enormous coal. That's the problem. And you look at somewhere like Bangladesh, which is they've got 4 million solar panels in Bangladesh now on roofs. We've only got 1.7. They not only have they got that, they've actually invented a system where they've got a blockchain with their phones that they can share energy. So there's no centralised grid. All their individual houses act as one grid. And so what's happening is that people are then buying and sharing their energy, and they deliberately, use different lights and use less power so they can make money selling it. And then if they go to a festival or something for 2 weeks, they can actually, there's already energy philanthropy that started. So you can give your energy to the hospital. So like just brilliant stuff. And there's now light in the hospital, there's lights in the street, so there's less attacks on women. There's all these benefits from having this energy democracy as opposed to an energy dictatorship, which we've got at the moment. So we go and look at something like that and then extrapolate it and say, this is what the world's doing by 2040. But you know what? It started in a country that no one would have picked, who's actually dealing with the excess of, well, the brunt of our excess. That's the irony, that these countries are having to adapt so quickly because of what we're doing. That I think it's important we don't make the film a kind of a white middle-class tech gadget Tesla film. It's got to feel that, we are, looking at all these other solutions that are going on around the world.
So if we're not hearing the solutions, I guess we're not hearing the extent of the problems either. So what have you uncovered through your research? Because I've heard various people like Bruce Lipton saying and various other scientists say we're entering the sixth mass extinction of a species, and we're that species. Would you agree with that?
No doubt about it. I mean, that's, even the people probably the biggest insight, and I think I can talk about it, but is meeting the American military and sitting at this round table and hearing what they know, and what they're preparing for in terms of national security. I mean, if we think we've got a refugee problem now, wait till some Category 5 typhoons hit Indonesia or the Philippines, and they're already planning for that, and there's just these whole mechanisms that scientists are understanding now around feedback loops. So it's one thing that we're warming, but the intense warming releases this methane in the permafrost, which accelerates. I mean, there's all these factors that we couldn't have predicted 5 years ago that are now in motion, and there's even pre-traumatic stress disorder now happening in scientists because they cannot get their message out. They know the severity of it and cannot believe no one's listening, that they're having breakdowns. It's a pre-traumatic stress.
And the message isn't getting out because the media is censoring it because they don't want to panic people.
Well, there's a bit of that.
And they don't want to damage industry.
There is a bit of that, but there is also an incredibly powerful climate mafia. And just like tobacco, just like sugar, which I experienced firsthand how that works, there is an enormous fossil fuel funded climate think tank that are putting out these messages. And I kind of did an experiment, which is kind of revealing, for 2 months, where I set up four fake Twitter accounts, and I followed all the people that I knew were on these think tanks and just wanted to get a sense of how they operate. And it was just incredible. Like, they've all got sort of 40 or 50 different accounts with different names and nationalities, so they're just constantly pumping out this stuff.
Wow.
And then if an article comes up, say, on The Guardian about the environment, they've got an algorithm where they're the first to respond, and they'll kind of instantly debunk it, so you create that ambiguity in their mind. It's all basic psychology, that suddenly someone goes, oh, maybe it's not that legitimate. So these are very well-funded, very clever think tanks, and I guess that's the problem. You look at people are totally unaware about what's happening with data now, that a company like this Columbia Analytica that Steve Bannon, who works for Trump, did. 1/3 of the tweets that were pro-Trump on Twitter during the election were algorithms that he'd invented. So it gave this sense that he had much more support than he really did. And they now say that they could tell a voter's preference based on 9 likes on Facebook, and they can give a full psychological profile based on 150 likes. Because these days you can love something, you can hate something, or whatever. So that's feeding, it's all free, and the illusion is that it's free, but these companies with these huge siren servers are accumulating that data and doing untold things with it. So that's another thing we need to sort of address and get our heads around, is what that looks like in 2040 in terms of our data use. And many people say that we'll get to a point where we'll actually get compensated for it. So at the moment, you do your searches, Google will actually auction off all your searches to different companies to buy it, who get paid. That we'll actually get a point where every quarter we'll get paid a check for our searches, because we just have to find a way to bring up that income or keep the middle class alive, because it's not going to work. We've already seen what's happened to music. Musicians have been completely dudded in this system. So it's going to happen to more and more fields if we don't get ahead of it and actually plan for it. So that's what we're trying to do in the film, is plant these seeds for the public at least, so that we are better equipped when they start coming up. There are discussions in the positive that we can have, because I think we are being hijacked brilliantly by the darkness at the moment, and they're really clever, and we need to fight back in a different way.
So tell us some of the things that you've done so far with the film, and what solutions you're becoming aware of.
Well, for the first time, there's a plan. So there's a plan that's emerged around the world, which is really exciting, and there's groups of scientists that have come together and sort of almost given the 100 best solutions of what we need to do, and they're kind of surprising. Like, the renewables one is kind of not the biggest issue. I mean, it's important, but food is actually the biggest thing. That if you combine the distribution, storage, production and waste of food, it's actually almost half our total emissions. And food waste is like number 3 on the list to get right. We waste the equivalent size of Mexico in crops every year in food. We waste it, while women in Africa are having to make mud and butter pies, So it's a ridiculous notion. So the food one is a huge one, but the most surprising, the number one thing we can do is actually the education of women in low-income countries. So there's now 225 million women that want more choice as to whether they have a baby or not. So there's nearly 80 million unwanted pregnancies a year in low-income countries. So if we got that right, we would actually prevent 1.2 billion extra people by 2050, which has a massive impact on our resources and whatnot. So I guess we need to sort of bring those to light and then start the solutions and discussing. And there are. I mean, you look at things like regenerative farming that's going on around the world now, which is just so exciting in terms of, traditional farming methods that are biological instead of chemical, and they have unbelievable impacts. And there are education campaigns going around the world. One of the most powerful I've seen so far is a group that started in Tanzania, and they're teaching kids, as it's mapped to their curriculum at school, they teach them emotional intelligence and meditation and self-empowerment and self-love. And just to hear these 10-year-old kids talk about loving themselves, stuff just like fucking blows your mind. And so we extrapolate that's part of the curriculum all around the world by 2040. And then what do our leaders look like? If they're getting taught that at a young age, are we going to have this ridiculous bickering bullshit we see in Parliament now? No, they're going to be very different. So like I said, it's the challenge is what to leave out, because there's so many things that we could put in there, and it could be a really boring 12-hour film, and it's got to be an entertaining 90 minutes. So, but like I said, the advantage is we've got this platform off the back of it. So, and what's really exciting is that often, I don't know about you, but you watch a documentary and you can get so empowered when you're watching it, and you're like, right, and then you just don't know where to go, and 5 minutes later you're like, oh fuck, So, but we've got this ability now, because of the narrative, we get to show what people did in 2021. So I think I've got a scene where my daughter is crowdfunding this protection of a species in a rainforest. And we've teamed up with an organisation that are doing that. So you can go, gee, that would be cool. And then you get to go to a website and go, oh, I can do it. I can give $1 right now. So there's going to be probably 30 or 40 of those throughout the film that are directly correlated to things you can do and get active straight away. Which is really exciting, and I think why we're getting the support we are.
Yeah. So obviously, education is kind of, you're seeing that as being knowledge as being the power, getting the message out there. Yeah,
I reckon.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's important that we dream again. I think that society is often guided by its imagery, and they are, like I said, really negative at the moment. And it's like with sugar. The film's kind of not about sugar in a way. I mean, it is, but I can probably say in this room more than anywhere that it's about your consciousness. It's about how it affects your perception of the world and how you feel. And if you're eating well, right, you feel that vitality and you feel vibrant. And I think when we're in a state of hope and rational and believing that there is a better way, we'll There'll be a better response, and we'll get action. Whereas at the moment, it's just like, it's too overwhelming. And that's, I guess, the failure of environmental movements, who I respect, but that the narrative has been wrong. It's like, we've got to tackle climate change. What does that mean? Like, what do you tackle? It's so ephemeral. Like, where do we go? That we need a new language around it. And even this think tank I went to with the military, and there was lots of heads of like NAB, and I was saying, I hear climate change and I think of bongo playing hippies, and that's what a lot of people think out there. So we need to reframe that. And he was saying, your film's got to talk about return on investments. What are the new industries that are going to help the way? So we do need to reframe that. And it has to stop being a left-right issue. We have to rise above that paradigm and actually go, this is actually bigger than all of us. And that stuff's just kids in the sandpit playing. Like, we've actually got to come together on this. And there are...
climate change, because just that word, it's easy for people to say, actually, it's a natural phenomenon. The Earth's been going through these cycles of cooling down and heating up. But what about if we just changed it to environment change? Like, that's undeniable that human beings are having a serious impact on this planet. We said today, 137 species lost every single day, an acre of forest lost every minute.
That's right. It's ecological damage, isn't it? Yeah, that's right. We need to reframe it because it's not working, that narrative. So I don't think we say climate change once in the film, and that's a very deliberate choice. And I've spoken to, there's a Republican senator named Bob Inglis, and he's trying to convince the Trump camp about how serious this is. And I had a wonderful chat with him, and he said, you've got to talk in language of abundance. That's what we need to hear. Don't talk about people think they're going to be deprived of things. So we're really trying to show that actually we can all be better off. We're actually going to be richer in a host of ways if we get this right. That if you have an equal society, then it benefits everyone. Like, there'll be less crime, less anxiety, all sorts of things will change because they're all symptoms of a broken system. And once we can kind of get that right, things, there'll be ripple effects we can't even imagine.
Yeah, gosh. And I noticed that we can get the exterior of life well or not, but it's so much to do with the interior, isn't it? And I think you've had a lot of illusions broken throughout your time with success and then the notoriety and the recognition, but you find it actually doesn't mean much in the end, does it?
No, and that's, I guess, what I was saying before is that, as an actor, often, people would come up and say, oh, mate, saw you as Greg Chappell, really liked that stuff. And it was nice, but the difference when you get a child or a wife coming up saying, my husband's reversed his type 2 diabetes, that's unbelievable. And that's a different form of currency, and that's a very pure currency. And I remember having quite a big turning point. Again, actually just after doing Animal Beatbox, I got really sick and I was in hospital. And I was put into a room with these 3 85-year-olds. Like, make the best sitcom. And and it was a full week of us just hanging out, getting to know each other. And one of the guys had these horrible night terrors, so I'd often get up and just kind of rub his hand in the middle of the night, and then he'd piss the bed and I'd have to change that and call the nurse in. And really had this profound week, really. And on the last night, I was awake at 2 o'clock, and I just got this pen and paper out and pretended I was 85. And I wrote this letter to myself going, have you done the things that you wanted to do? You have so many thoughts and feelings about the world, but have you acted on them? And can you write that letter and be proud of the life you've lived? Or did you just hide behind acting and, ego stuff? Or did you actually put yourself out there? So, and it really hit me really hard that I didn't want to be in that room at 85 and not acted on the things that I really care about. That would just be a real tragedy that I'd be upset with myself. So,
what did you do to overcome your self-doubt and your fear and all those demons lurking within everyone?
So I guess the way I describe it is, and it's probably people understand this, but it's like I saw Mum and Dad like the hard drives or 2 discs that came together and they made me. And then most of my life I played this program that ran out on the computer. And the minute I could start to see those programs playing and understand what they were, it kind of, which I guess is what being aware or being conscious of those programs is, I could start to alter the direction and go, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I know that's ingrained in me, but no, I'm going to go a different way. And that took a lot of work, and I was lucky enough to meet certain people that came into my life at the right time that helped me come through that and really let stuff go. I had a lot of damage and a lot of self-doubt, like so much, addled with it. And so that was really confronting to actually have to look at those patterns. And I had to do a lot of healing with my mum and my dad, and mum was really open to that, and we did a lot of stuff together of just really going to the places and just doing certain exercises. I remember doing some where you actually have to sort of tune into the energy of your mum or something, and then say, what's it like when Damon does this, and really get to see your impact on people and how, when you're in that state operating, how it influences other people. And I found that really confronting, that I hadn't been the best version of myself that I could be. I'd sort of been distracted by other things. So it was a combination of that. I sort of did a lot of reading, but again, you can understand it intellectually. You've actually got to live through it. Yeah. And then I had a pretty profound ayahuasca experience too. Like, I had never had a huge desire to do it, and Zoe and I went through South America and spent 3 weeks in the Amazon, and just to do that, just to be in the Amazon, and it was incredible. We had this guide that had never left the Amazon, and so he was just unbelievable. Like, his eyesight, he'd spot like a toucan a kilometre away, and I just, you get to immerse yourself in this jungle and hear all their stories, and you go, of course there's a spirit there, of course there's Mother Earth. And we had the opportunity one night with this shaman to do ayahuasca, and I had just a remarkable experience. And I think I'd done a lot of work at the time to let stuff go, so I felt quite open and ready for it. So I didn't have a negative experience. It was quite euphoric, actually, and had conversations with friends that had passed away, like really deep stuff that you can't really explain. And Zoe the same. She'd sort of had, she'd never done anything like that before, and God bless her, she just put the seatbelt on and went for it. And it changed. It does change you in some way. It does open you up as well. So it's not for everyone. And I probably, I did it just one night, and I'd do it again probably one day. But I think that probably played a role as well, just in confirming.
What did you come away with from that? Like, what did it reveal to you or unfold to you?
Well, I think everyone's different, and you get what you're supposed to get. And I think because intellectually I'd understood some of these things and was really trying to understand the universe, I almost got this kind of tour of it was like this lovely guided tour of like, see, yep, this is true, and this is also true. And so it was, I remember just bawling my eyes out, because I was like, oh, like it's real. It is actually real. Like, it's not just these things and concepts I'd read in my head. And
what were those things?
Just the nature of reality.
Okay.
And it was almost like lifting up the veil and going, oh, right, okay. And seeing how things operate and seeing who we are. And I had, moments where I remember having this pretty horrific vomiting experience, but it wasn't a vomit. It was like I leant over, and the entire earth just like opened up, this hole, and I was like, whoa, that's pretty intense. And then I just had this vomit, and it was just like black serpents going out of my mouth, and I just was like, what? But I was laughing at the same time and crying. It was not a vomit. Do you know what I mean? It was not your standard vomit, vodka-infused Sunday morning vomit. It was a physical release of all sorts of stuff. And then I was just taken on this journey with my mum and dad, who'd had a weird, thing. And I got shown what it was like for them when I was a baby, and that experience. And then, then a dear friend of mine that passed away, who was really into this sort of stuff as well, he just rocked up like you are there, and we just had this completely lucid conversation. I was like... And I remember even saying to Zoe, like yelling out, going, Zoe, Mark says hello. She's like, hi, Mark. Like, and then, but the most profound thing for Zoe is that she saw our daughter, and described her to me, and her laugh and her eyes and her hair, and that's our daughter now to a T, and. So there's this, everyone's got their view on it, but there is some unknown magic to it that no one can describe. And there were too many moments of incredible magic in that for something not to be going on, So I'm very open to that, each their own. But it was very special.
And I think culturally we don't explore consciousness. We explore the exterior dimensions, but not the dimension of our own consciousness. And do you think that... Some people believe that there are cultural engineers that are doing what they can to, lead people away from themselves. Do you think that's been designed, or you just think that's part of our cultural evolution, that we have to go very far externally before we kind of come back onto self?
No, I don't think it's as pure as that. I think, there are books and there's documents written in the 1920s by people like Edward Bernays, who sort of started the PR industry. Who was actually the nephew of Sigmund Freud. And Sigmund Freud at the time had been really... he just didn't trust humans. He thought we were too irrational, and so we needed to be controlled. So that's how Bernays came up with this idea, well, let's keep people, if we keep them in an irrational state, wanting things and consuming things, and we keep them in this state of fear and anxiety, then we can actually get on with doing the things we need to do. We're more docile and controllable. So I don't think that maybe he would have foreseen how out of control that became. But I think if you think even about the advertising industry, that they fight so hard to keep us in an irrational state. So, if they're going to sell a car, it's kind of driving up the side of the mountain, there's a guy hanging out, it's all this kind of, oh yeah. They have to fight so hard because we are rational beings. Like, they have to work that hard because we are good people, And I think that we've kind of accepted that as the norm now, but it's not. It's just what we've got used to, and it's become those cultural memes. It's become those images that we're guided by, and I guess that's the motivation for this new film, is how do we actually provide a different narrative and start getting people to kind of feast on a different version of that.
So what's 2040 look like to you then? Because I love the film actually looks back on what you did to arrive where we are now, rather than sort of projecting what we could potentially do, but we've done it, so it's more aspirational that way.
Yeah, I think one of the more exciting things in terms of just the physical look of it is probably something that is going to happen, is that with this onset of driverless cars that's happening so fast, is that we'll get to a point probably in 2025 where there'll be city zones that are driverless only, because at the moment, when the human's involved, that's when we have the accidents. But if it's just purely driverless, our city centres will be just driverless cars. And so nearly every scientist says the implications of that means that there'll actually be about 70% less cars. So people, because they're a stranded asset now, they sit in the garage for 96% of the time. A lot of people won't have cars. And if you look at the statistics, I think it's 90% of 80-year-olds still have their licence, but only 60% of 24-year-olds have a licence. So there's this need for a car is kind of starting to diminish. It's easier to grab an Uber or whatnot. So that's only going to intensify. But as scary on one aspect that is, the benefit is that if we have 80% less cars, we get, in the first time in history, to redesign our cities for people instead of cars. So all the car parks disappear, all the side of the roads don't have cars anymore. So what do we do with that? And that's what's exciting about what we're doing. Let's have some food forests, and let's have some community spaces, and let's have art spaces, and let's have musicians playing. Let's actually plant that seed for the public of what we're going to do with that excess space. And we've been working with Melbourne University, and they've done 4 different scenarios for a city of 2040. And beautifully, 98% of people want community spaces, and this is it. So that's what we're trying to promote, that we're actually getting humans to interact again. That's kind of our vision. Obviously, rooftop gardens everywhere, lots of greenery, eco-sci-fi. Technology will still exist in our version, but it's just going to be, I think we'll evolve to a better use of technology. I think at the moment we're like kind of teenagers, and it's all a bit narcissistic, and we're taking photos of ourselves and whatnot. But we'll graduate, and we'll find that there are these incredibly powerful ways we can use, like democracy or like blockchain servers and stuff, that will actually start using technology for really wonderful devices, systems. So that's kind of a big element. Obviously, food's going to be a massive factor. How that looks, lots of more real foods. Truth in labelling, truth in advertising, things like that, which is going to be good fun to play with, like doing truth in advertising, and then obviously the people's a big one. I think if we can get that system right, and there are incredible initiatives coming up. There's of what they call donut economies or circular economies, like so mimicking nature more. So you think of something like ants, which ants have a collective biomass equal to humans if you put them all together, but they don't leave any mess. Like they're so efficient. So if we can start designing economies to do that, and there are examples. There's one in France that we're going to film of a coal mining region, and the government funded their transition to new jobs, and they don't. So they use their food waste and turn it into energy. All their excess clothes in the town they use and turn them into vats. Any plastics recycled into different. So there's this kind of circular. They're not leaving any waste in the town. They're kind of zero emit of anything. So I like to think that that's 2040. That's what we've got to. That You know, we're using biodegradable seed cups that we're planting. You know, they exist. Everything in that trailer exists already, and that's a big premise of the film. Is that apart from the hoverboard, that that what people see in the film that we make will exist. So they can go, oh, that'd be great, and we go, yeah, well,
it's already here.
It's here. We just need to put it in the mainstream. That's So there's just it is. There's lots of wonderful things happening.
Amazing. Thank you. Thanks for your time. Yeah, let's.
2040. So it's going to be really accurate. You know?
It'll be so dated by
then.
then.
2039, and it'll be close enough. Like, how did you know, bro? Okay. No, I think the end of next year. It's a special effects monster. Just trying to get people excited by what they see. So
you're going to be typecast as not the sugar guy anymore, but the spokesperson for a new Earth. You ready for it?
No. I think what's exciting about this one, what's very different and deliberate, is that it's not my version of 20. It's not like Gameau land. It's that that we have we've got 100 and something people already collaborating on it. That it is a collective. And that we've already started interviewing, we've got 700 kids, and like, camera, what do you want in 2040? And then let's try and give them what they want. I mean, that's their world. They're going to be my age then. Let's at least ask them, and we're doing that with kids all over the world. And undeniably, it's about connection and peace and looking after the planet.
Can Conscious Club be involved in the premiere?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do a Conscious Club premiere.
Awesome.
Well, we should do actually like even some brainstorming think tank about what people want for 2040 and get that discussion going. I think we're hoping to release. Yeah, anyway, I can't tell you that yet. But yes, let's do a Conscious Club thing.
But anyway, Damon flew down. We're on the same plane from Byron today, so he's come down especially for this. He's going home tomorrow. That's how generous this guy is. So thank you so much for all your efforts for not just yourself, but for our country. Putting Australia on the map as people who have solutions and are creative and innovative. So thanks for, the planet. Yeah. Beautiful. Thanks, mate. Thanks, Brad.